Welcome to Inside East African Politics. For Ethiopia, where millions face food insecurity, wheat is absolutely critical.
It really is. It's the third main grain they consume, but huge numbers still need food aid.
Right, and against that background, we've heard this narrative from Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's administration about a wheat miracle, Ethiopia as this big agricultural success story. So today we're doing a deep dive. We'll look at that story and put it next to independent data, see where things line up, where they really diverge, and, well, what it all means.
It's quite a contrast. Ethiopia definitely has huge potential in farming, no doubt. But with ongoing food insecurity, data about something as basic as food, well, it can get very political.
Okay, so let's jump into the first major claim, that Ethiopia is now Africa's top wheat producer.
Yeah, that's a core part of the official narrative. Sometimes the figures mentioned are really high, like 23, even up to 30 million metric tons recently.
Wow. But how does that stack up against what independent bodies are saying?
Well, that's where it gets tricky. If you look at the UN's FAO, or the USDA, the African Development Bank, they all consistently put Egypt as the top producer in Africa.
So not Ethiopia, according to them.
No. They usually rank Ethiopia second. And their production estimates are much lower, think somewhere between, say, 5.8 and maybe 7.5 million tons for those same years.
That's a massive gap. We're talking 3, 4, maybe 5 times lower than the official claims.
Exactly. It's a huge discrepancy.
Does that just come down to different ways of measuring, or is something else potentially going on?
A gap that large. It likely points to more than just methodology. I mean, there have been reports about political interference in the National Statistics Agency, leadership changes, things like that, which could definitely impact the data coming out.
Okay, and building on that number one claim, there's another assertion that Ethiopia produces 3 times more wheat than Egypt.
Right, pushing it even further. But again, the independent data just doesn't support that. It actually contradicts it.
How?
Well, take 2022 FAO data, for example. Egypt was at about 9.7 million tons. Ethiopia, around 7 million. So less than Egypt, definitely not 3 times more.
So even recent USDA figures show Egypt ahead.
Yes. For 2023-24, Egypt's production was still estimated higher. So that 3 times more claim, it just doesn't hold up against the independent numbers for Egypt.
Let's switch gears to imports. Another key part of the narrative is self-sufficiency. The claim that Ethiopia hasn't imported any wheat for, 3 years?
Yes, that's central to the self-reliance message. Saving foreign currency, feeding itself. But trade data from multiple sources paints a very different picture.
Meaning imports have continued.
Substantial ones, yes. And right through that period, even into this year.
Do we have specifics?
We do. In 2022, Ethiopia imported over $500 million worth of wheat. For 2023, estimates put imports somewhere between 1.4 and 1.7 million tons.
And even now, in 2024?
Yep. USDA data shows private traders brought in 400,000 tons just in the first 5 months of this year. That's actually up from the previous year.
Okay, so imports are clearly still happening. Has the government addressed this discrepancy?
There has been a sort of clarification, acknowledging that self-sufficiency does not mean that wheat imports will entirely cease. The suggestion was maybe international groups are still importing for aid.
But that doesn't explain everything.
Not really. It doesn't account for those large commercial imports by private traders that the data clearly shows. It feels like an attempt to square the circle, perhaps.
Thinking bigger picture then, why push this wheat miracle narrative so strongly if it diverges so much from independent data? What are the potential political motives?
It seems tied into a broader political strategy. This miracle acts as a symbol, national progress, self-reliance, fitting with the whole Maidamer philosophy.
Projecting success.
Exactly. Projecting development, attracting investment, maybe positioning Ethiopia as a model for the continent. And perhaps it serves as a useful positive story.
When there are other serious internal challenges, like conflict, inflation, the hunger crisis itself.
Precisely. A counter-narrative. And those actions reported against the stats agency. That suggests maybe an effort to control information that might contradict this preferred story.
What happens then, practically, when policy might be based on inaccurate data? What are the consequences?
Oh, they're serious. If you base agricultural policy, how you allocate resources, subsidies on inflated numbers, you risk inefficiency.
And trust.
Absolutely. That gap between the official story and people's lived reality, millions eating food aid, that erodes public trust. It can breed discontent.
And for food security planning.
It makes it incredibly difficult. If you're downplaying import needs and overstating production, you hinder effective planning. You could mislead donors, potentially impacting aid flows when millions still rely on it. It can even distort markets, leading to shortages or price hikes that hurt the most vulnerable.
So given this divergence and the stakes involved, what's the path towards, well, more reliable grain data in Ethiopia?
It really highlights the need for transparency, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The good thing is frameworks and international support for data collection are there,
So it's about using them effectively.
and ensuring accountability. Things like independent audits of crop data could help, maybe more involvement from international observers in verification. Open data platforms, too.
Because you need that solid foundation of accurate information.
You absolutely do. It's fundamental for sound policy, for tackling the real challenges like food insecurity head-on.
What this deep dive really underscores is that critical difference between a powerful narrative and verifiable facts on the ground. And it makes you think, what are the real costs when the story being told doesn't match reality, especially for something as fundamental as feeding millions of people? Something to consider.